Hello and welcome to another video. Today we'll be taking a look at the collectivization campaigns in the Soviet Union. First of all, the historical context, then the objectives and goals, the implementation strategies, the major phases of collectivization, methods and tactics, the resistance and repression, the economic and social impact, cultural and psychological effects, the political consequences, the historiographical perspectives, and last up some books and quotes. First up, the historical context. Following the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917, the Soviet leadership aimed to transform the agrarian economy into a socialist one. Industrialization needed to be supported by a modernized agricultural sector. By the late 1920s, Stalin and the Soviet leadership sought to transition from the NEP, which allowed some private farming, to a fully collectivized agricultural system to eliminate capitalist elements in the countryside. The objectives and goals. They wanted to increase agricultural productivity to support rapid industrialization, accumulate grain for export to finance industrial projects, and ensure stable food supplies for the urban workforce. They also wanted to break the power of the kulaks, which were wealthier peasants, would consolidate state control over agriculture, and eliminate resistance to socialist policies in the countryside. They also wanted to create a classless rural society by collectivizing farms, promoting socialist values, and eradicating traditional peasant culture. The implementation strategies. Formation of koltsoi and sovkhozy. The establishment of collective farms, kolkhozy, where peasants worked together, and state farms, sovkhozy, were all directly controlled by the government. The enforcement mechanisms. The use of political and social pressure, propaganda, and coercive measures, including violence and repression by the OGPU, the successors to the Cheka, and local authorities. Dekulakization, a campaign to liquidate the kulaks as a class through confiscation of property, deportation, and execution of those labeled as kulaks. Kulaks. Major phases of collectivization. The initial phase, 1928 to 1930. Early efforts to promote voluntary collectivization met with limited success, leading to increased state coercion. The 25th Thousanders, industrial workers sent to enforce collectivization, played a key role. Forced collectivization, 1930 to 1933. A massive push for compulsory collectivization was initiated, leading to widespread resistance and violent suppression, culminating in Stalin's Dizzy with Success article, March 1930, that temporarily moderated the campaign. Stabilization phase, 1934 to 1937. By the mid-1930s, collectivization was largely completed and the focus shifted to consolidating the collective farms and improving agricultural practices, methods, and tactics. The regime employed propaganda to promote the benefits of collectivization, portraying collective farms as modern and productive and vilifying kulaks as exploiters. They also utilized terror, forced deportations, and executions to enforce compliance with significant involvement of the NKVD, People's Commissariat for Internal Affairs, in suppression activities. The seizure of grain, livestock, and other assets from peasants, imposition of quotas and collectivization targets, and dismantling of traditional village structures were implemented. Resistance and repression. Peasants resisted collectivization through passive non-cooperation, sabotage, slaughtering livestock to prevent confiscation, and open rebellion, such as the Tambov Rebellion. The Soviet state responded with harsh repression, including mass arrests, executions, and deportations of resistant peasants, which resulted in significant loss of life and widespread suffering. The disruption of agricultural production and forced requisitions contributed to the Soviet famine of 1932 to 1933, particularly devastating Ukraine, the Holodomor, resulting in millions of deaths. The economic and social impact. Initially, The economic disruption caused a severe decline in agricultural productivity, leading to food shortages, famine, and economic dislocation in the countryside. The gradual recovery and eventual stabilization of agricultural production in collective farms, though often at the expense of efficiency and peasant welfare. It also transformed rural society, breaking traditional structures and consolidating state control, but also engendering resentment and hardship among the peasantry. Cultural and psychological effects. The collectivization disrupted traditional rural life, eroding communal bonds, customs, and the autonomy of village communities. The forced collectivization led to the breakdown of traditional family roles as economic and social pressures reshaped rural life. The widespread fear, trauma, and distrust of the state among peasants due to the violence and coercion experienced during the collectivization was also, of course, a big trauma, in this case a psychological one. The political consequences. Well, it strengthened Stalin's power. The successful implementation of collectivization consolidated Stalin's power by eliminating potential rural opposition and establishing tighter control over the countryside. But it of course also had impact on the party policies. It shaped Soviet agricultural and economic policies for decades, reinforcing the model of centralized planning and state control over the economy. Historiographical perspectives. The official Soviet narratives portrayed collectivization as a necessary and ultimately successful effort to modernize agriculture and eliminate capitalist elements. Though Western historians and critics often emphasize the human cost, economic disruption, and moral implications of forced collectivization and repression. Modern Russian and international historians continue to debate the legacy of collectivization, focusing on its long-term impact on Soviet agriculture and rural society. Now, some books and quotes. First up, Stalin's Peasants, Resistance and Survival in the Russian Village After Collectivization by Sheila Fitzpatrick. She examines the impact of collectivization in peasant life and resistance. The Soviet Tragedy, The History of Socialism in Russia, 1917 to 1991, by Martina Malia. It provides a comprehensive history of the Soviet Union, including the collectivization campaign. Harvest of Sorrow, Soviet Collectivization and the Terror Famine, by Robert Conquest. It's a detailed study of the human impact of collectivization and the famine, particularly the Holodomor. Now, some quotes. The soul of our revolution must now march into the countryside, bringing with it the light of collectivization. Joseph Stalin. We must break the Kulak resistance. It is an essential task of socialism construction in the countryside. Molotov. The collectivization campaigns reshaped the Soviet countryside, but the cost in human suffering and socialist dislocation was immense. Robert Conquest. Collectivization was a brutal experiment in social engineering aimed at remaking the countryside to fit the vision of a socialist utopia. Sheila Fitzpatrick. The forced collectivization of agriculture was a tragedy for millions, leading to famine, repression, and the destruction of a way of life. Martina Malia. Stalin's collectivization was a revolutionary assault on the peasantry, justified by the need to modernize but executed with ruthless disregard for human life. Andrea Graziosi. Thank you for listening. Bye.